3 disturbing true winter horror stories. Winter. It blankets the world in white, muffles the noise, and leaves everything quiet. Too quiet. But beneath that serene frozen exterior, in the shadowed woods, lonely highways, and forgotten cabins, something stirs. And not everything that awakens in the cold is meant to be found. These are 3 disturbing true winter horror stories. And after you hear them, you might think twice before booking that cozy winter getaway. Story 1. The Lost Hiker of Pine Hollow. It was supposed to be an easy weekend hike. Greg wasn't an expert, but he loved the outdoors. Pine Hollow Trail, nestled deep in the snowy mountains, was supposed to be peaceful. The kind of place where you can breathe in the fresh air and forget about the world. He set off early. The sun was barely rising, casting long shadows over the snow. The first few miles were perfect. Untouched snow, the quiet crunch of his boots, and the distant sound of a stream running under ice. But then the trees closed in. The trail got narrower, the light dimmed, and the silence became oppressive. That's when Greg saw the first footprints. Not his. They were fresh. Too fresh. Someone else was out there. He wasn't alone. The prints wandered off the trail, disappearing into the trees. Greg wasn't sure why he followed them. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the unnerving feeling that someone needed help. The tracks led him deeper into the woods, zigzagging through the snow like whoever made them wasn't walking, but running. And then they stopped. Just stopped. No sign of where they went. The snow was undisturbed around them, as if the person had vanished mid-step. Greg looked around, his breath fogging in the freezing air. The woods were silent, too silent. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft, broken, carried on the wind. "Help! Me!" His stomach dropped. He called out, his voice echoing off the trees. No answer, just that whisper, again, closer this time. He turned and froze. A figure stood between the trees, not moving, just watching. Pale, too pale, almost blue. Clothes tattered and wrong for the weather, thin like summer clothes. Their head was tilted, eyes sunken and hollow. Greg stumbled back. His foot sank into the snow, twisting his ankle painfully. He bit back a scream, crawling backward as the figure stepped forward and disappeared. Gone, like the snow swallowed it whole. When Greg made it back to the trailhead hours later, exhausted, freezing, and limping, he found a park ranger waiting. Concerned, the man asked where Greg had gone. Greg told him everything. The ranger's face paled. He told Greg no one else was on the trail today. In fact, no one had hiked Pine Hollow in months. Not since a young man named Daniel went missing last winter. They never found his body, just his footprints, leading off the trail. Story 2. The Frozen Man on Highway 23. Liz was driving home from her parents' place after Christmas. A long, boring stretch through rural backroads, coated in snow and ice. The wind howled against her car, and her headlights barely cut through the swirling flurries. She wasn't worried, not yet. That changed when she saw him. A man standing on the side of the road, barely visible in the snow. He wasn't waving, wasn't moving. Just standing there, his face pale and gaunt. His clothes looked wrong, thin, soaked through. His eyes were black pits in the dim light. Liz's stomach knotted. She didn't stop, but a mile down the road, she saw him again. Same man, same clothes, same hollow stare. Her heart pounded. She drove faster. He couldn't have gotten ahead of her. It wasn't possible. Another mile. He was there again. She nearly screamed. Her phone had no signal. The radio cut to static. She felt trapped. The car her only safety. She kept driving, faster and faster, until she saw lights. A gas station flickering in the snow. She pulled in, hands shaking, and bolted inside. The cashier, a middle-aged guy with a tired face, noticed her panic. He asked what was wrong. She told him everything. His expression darkened. Slowly he walked to the window and looked out at the road. "You saw him too," he muttered. Liz's throat tightened. "Two?" He nodded. "You're not the first. They say he died out there. Some traveler. Froze to death trying to hitch a ride. But sometimes he finds his way back. Tries to get someone to take him home." Liz stared at him, her skin crawling. She couldn't shake the feeling that even now, through the snow, those black eyes were still watching. Story 3. The Cabin That Waits. John and his wife, Amy, rented a cabin in the mountains for a romantic getaway. Secluded, picturesque, the perfect winter escape. At first, everything was perfect. The snow was beautiful. The fireplace crackled warmly. The cabin was rustic but cozy. But the first night, things started to change. It was little things at first. A cold draft, even though the windows were shut. Strange noises. A thud upstairs. A faint scratching on the walls. John chalked it up to an old cabin settling in the cold. But Amy woke up screaming. She swore she saw someone standing in the corner of the room. A man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, watching them. John searched the cabin. Nothing. The second night it got worse. The scratching was louder now, almost frantic. The lights flickered. Their phones wouldn't charge. And the man came back. John woke to find Amy sitting up in bed, eyes wide, tears streaming down her face. She wouldn't blink, wouldn't move. He shook her, panic rising. Finally she spoke, her voice hollow. "He's coming. He's almost here." The cabin door slammed open, snow blasting in. John grabbed Amy and ran. They didn't stop until they reached the nearest town. The locals didn't seem surprised. One old man just shook his head and said, "That cabin doesn't want visitors. It wants to keep them." If these stories didn't freeze you to the bone, you might want to check out I Rented an Airbnb. And the last guest never left. A terrifying story. Trust me, some places never want to let you go. Hit that next video if you dare.